The crown touched Rebecca's head at the exact moment Liam stopped breathing. The auditorium erupted. People rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. The announcer lifted her hand high as if presenting royalty. Savannah Rising Star. "Rebecca!" Her teal dress shimmered beneath the stage lights. Her curls framed a face that no longer asked permission to exist. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't shrinking. She was standing tall. And in the back of the room, Liam felt something collapse inside him. Because 6 months earlier, in their own living room, he had leaned down toward Nia and whispered words he thought were harmless. "Sweetie, don't stare at Mommy like that. You're the pretty one." Rebecca had been in the kitchen. She heard it. She always heard it. Now that same little girl was jumping near the stage barrier, shouting proudly, "That's my Mommy! She's the most beautiful!" The room roared again. Liam's hands went cold. How did the woman he once teased about being plain become the woman Savannah refused to stop applauding? How did the woman he casually corrected become the woman everyone else celebrated? Welcome to Mr. Grey Family, a storytelling universe built for people who crave meaning, emotion, and unforgettable narratives. Here, every story begins with a spark and ends with a feeling you'll carry long after the video ends. Love, betrayal, family, secrets, lessons, it's all here, wrapped in immersive narration that makes you forget everything else. If you're searching for stories that pull your heart, challenge your mind, and keep you coming. Have you ever watched someone rise after you convinced yourself they couldn't? Have you ever said something small that slowly became someone else's doubt? Some men don't tear their wives down loudly. They do it quietly, through comparisons, through jokes, through whispers meant only for a child's ears. And sometimes the woman you underestimate becomes the woman the world refuses to ignore. If you believe words matter, if you believe respect in marriage isn't optional, like this video right now, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps YouTube push this story to people who need it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what you're about to see isn't just transformation, it's consequence. On stage, Rebecca stepped forward to the microphone. "My life motto?" she repeated, her voice steady. The auditorium fell silent. No one else decides your worth. Not applause, not criticism, not even the person you love. The sentence landed like truth spoken from experience. Liam felt heat crawl up his neck. He remembered her standing in their bathroom months ago, wiping her eyes before coming to bed. He remembered laughing when she tripped in heels once and telling her, "Stick to flats, Rebecca." He remembered correcting her outfit choices, calling her safe, calling her simple. He thought he was being honest. He thought he was helping. But standing there now, watching the crowd hang on to her words, he realized something unbearable. She had changed, and he had nothing to do with it. The announcer raised her hand again. "Let's hear it for Rebecca." The applause felt endless. Nia broke free from the side aisle and ran straight into her mother's arms. Rebecca bent effortlessly, lifting her daughter high without breaking her composure. "I told you," Nia laughed. "You're the prettiest." Liam closed his eyes briefly. Prettiest. That word had once belonged only to their daughter in his mind. Now it belonged to Rebecca in the eyes of an entire city. He stepped back toward the exit, watching reporters crowd closer. Microphones extended, cameras angled for better shots. Rebecca didn't look overwhelmed. She looked prepared. That unsettled him even more. When had she prepared? When had she decided she was more than what he described? His phone buzzed with notifications. Headlines were already forming. Humble Savannah mom stuns the city. He swallowed hard. He hadn't noticed her mornings changing. He hadn't noticed her posture straightening. He hadn't noticed her silence turning into focus. Because he wasn't looking. As Rebecca stepped off stage into a sea of flashing cameras, Liam understood something that bruised his pride deeper than public embarrassment. She had grown beyond him. Not out of rebellion, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. And suddenly the man who commanded rooms full of investors felt very small in a room full of strangers. Rebecca glanced toward the back of the auditorium for just a second. Their eyes met. There was no anger in her gaze, no accusation, just clarity. That look unsettled him more than rage ever could, because it said something simple. I found myself. The applause swelled again, and just as Rebecca stepped outside into the warm Savannah night, crown reflecting the glow of streetlights. We go back, 6 months earlier, Savannah, Georgia, Before the crown, before the cameras, before America watched her rise, back to a house beneath live oaks. Back to quiet comments, back to the slow erosion no one else could see. 6 months earlier, Savannah, Georgia breathed differently in the mornings. Golden light filtered through the hanging Spanish moss, settling gently over brick sidewalks and narrow streets in the historic black neighborhood where Rebecca had grown up. Porch swings creaked softly. Birds called from the live oaks. Somewhere in the distance, church bells marked the hour. Inside the house, Rebecca was already awake. The scent of butter and warm batter filled the kitchen as she flipped pancakes with one hand and packed Nia's lunch with the other. Her movements were automatic, practiced, steady, careful. "Mommy," Nia said from the table, her legs swinging beneath her chair, "can I wear the sparkly shoes today? The silver ones?" Rebecca smiled. "Yes, they make me fast." Rebecca laughed softly. "All right, but only if you promise not to race your teacher." Nia gasped. "I would never." The front bedroom door opened. Liam stepped into the hallway, adjusting his watch, already dressed for the day. Crisp white shirt, dark jacket, the sharp scent of cologne following him. He paused at the kitchen entrance. "You're still in that?" he asked, nodding toward Rebecca's faded house dress. Rebecca glanced down briefly. "I was going to change after drop-off." He leaned against the doorway. "You don't have to look like you just rolled out of bed every morning." The comment wasn't loud. It wasn't harsh, but it lingered. Nia frowned. "Mommy looks pretty." Liam gave a quick chuckle. "Of course she does, baby." Rebecca focused on the stove. Breakfast passed with the quiet rhythm of utensils against plates. Liam checked emails between bites. Rebecca reminded Nia to finish her fruit. When he stood to leave, he kissed Nia's forehead first. "Be good at school." Then he turned to Rebecca. "There's a dinner tonight at the public kitchen. Investors flying in from Atlanta. It's formal. I remember," she said. "Try something bold," he added. "You always play it safe. Safe." The word stayed in the air after he left. Once the door shut, the house seemed larger. Rebecca cleaned slowly, stacking plates in silence. She walked Nia to preschool under the canopy of live oaks, their shadows dancing across the sidewalk. "I like your hair today, Mommy," Nia said suddenly. Rebecca touched her curls. "Thank you. Daddy says you should change it sometimes." Rebecca kept her tone calm. "Daddy has opinions, but I like it like this." Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "That's what matters." After dropping Nia off, Rebecca drove toward downtown. She passed the church she used to attend every Sunday, before marriage became busier than faith. She could still hear the choir in her memory, strong voices rising without hesitation. Back then, she sang loudly. Now she mostly listened. She parked briefly outside Kim's Cafe, the small soul food restaurant that had fed her since childhood. The sign in the window read, "Family-run, God-led, and love-filled." Inside, the atmosphere was warm and unpretentious. Older couples shared laughter over grits and coffee. Someone called out her name in greeting. "Morning, Rebecca." "Morning." She ordered coffee but didn't linger. Watching other women sit comfortably in themselves stirred something complicated inside her. Not envy, not bitterness, just awareness. Back home, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The house was quiet. She studied her reflection carefully. No makeup, slight tiredness around her eyes. A softness she used to love about herself now felt like something she needed to justify. She tilted her chin. Was she actually plain? Or had she simply accepted someone else's description? She opened the drawer, pulled out a lipstick she hadn't worn in months, and applied it lightly. The color brightened her face instantly. She stared. It wasn't dramatic, but it was different. Her phone rang. "Liam." "Hey," she answered. "Did you confirm the Atlanta trip next week?" "Yes, good. I need everything smooth right now. I can't handle distractions." She hesitated. "Everything okay?" "Just pressure," he replied. "I'm carrying a lot." Rebecca looked at herself in the mirror again. "I know you are," she said softly. "That's why I need you solid at home. Solid, reliable, unchanging." "I am," she replied. The call ended. Rebecca placed the phone down slowly. Liam's confidence in public was undeniable. He commanded rooms, negotiated deals, impressed executives. But at home he rarely asked how she felt. He assumed, and she allowed it. Later that afternoon, when Nia ran into her arms after preschool, Rebecca held her a little tighter than usual. "My teacher said I draw beautiful," Nia announced proudly. "You do," Rebecca replied. Nia looked up seriously. "Daddy says you're lucky to have him." Rebecca forced a small smile. "Daddy works hard, but you work hard too." The simplicity of that statement settled deeply inside her. As they walked home beneath the sweeping moss, Rebecca straightened her shoulders slightly. Not in defiance, not yet, just in awareness. Something inside her was waking up, and for the first time in a long while she began to wonder, what if she stopped shrinking to make someone else comfortable? Savannah felt different after sunset. The river reflected gold and navy as lights flickered on across the Plant Riverside district. Music drifted from balconies. Glasses clinked. Conversations rose and fell with the tide. Liam belonged to that world. That evening, Rebecca stood by the bedroom closet holding two dresses. One was fitted, bold in color. The other was modest, familiar. She chose the modest one. When Liam stepped into the room adjusting his cufflinks, he glanced at her briefly. "That's what you're wearing." "Yes." He hesitated. "It's fine. Just don't fade into the background tonight." The comment was delivered lightly, but it carried weight. At the public kitchen, the room buzzed with energy. Investors from Atlanta shook hands. Laughter rolled across polished floors. Rebecca walked beside Liam, offering polite smiles, careful not to speak too much unless directly addressed. "Liam's wife," someone said, extending a hand. Rebecca returned the gesture. "Nice to meet you. She keeps everything stable home," Liam added with a grin, "so I can focus on the big stuff." Rebecca smiled because that was expected. Later, when conversations shifted toward technology and expansion strategies, Liam subtly angled his body away from her, fully engaged in animated discussion. Rebecca stood near the edge of the room, sipping sparkling water, watching other couples converse easily. Some women spoke confidently about their own careers. Others laughed freely without scanning their husbands' faces for approval. She felt present, but not included. After an hour, Liam leaned toward her. "You can head home if you want. I'll be late." She nodded. "Okay." Outside, the Savannah night air felt cooler. She drove home alone. From the driveway, she could still hear faint music from somewhere near the river. The house greeted her with silence. Inside, she removed her heels and set them neatly by the door. Moments later, her phone buzzed. A photo. Liam on a yacht earlier that week, city lights behind him. His caption read, "Building Empires." Rebecca stared at it longer than she meant to. Building empires. She wondered when she had stopped building anything for herself. She checked on Nia, who slept peacefully, one arm wrapped around a stuffed animal. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. "You're beautiful, Mummy," Nia had said that morning. The words echoed. After closing the bedroom door gently, Rebecca walked into the living room and turned on soft music from her phone, a gospel song she remembered from District Live during a Sunday brunch months earlier. That day she and Nia had stood near the stage, clapping with strangers as a local band blended R&B with church harmonies. Rebecca had laughed freely when Nia tried copying the singer's high notes. She remembered feeling light, unfiltered. She hadn't been worried about fitting in. She hadn't been measuring herself. She had simply existed. Now, alone in her living room, she stood barefoot on the hardwood floor and let the music play quietly. She tried walking across the room with more intention, shoulders back, chin lifted slightly. Halfway across, she stopped and laughed at herself. "What are you doing?" she whispered. But she tried again. Slow steps, straight posture. She caught her reflection in the darkened window. For a brief second, she saw something she hadn't seen in months. Potential. Not the version Liam described, not the version she defended, just herself. Headlights swept across the wall as Liam pulled into the driveway sometime after midnight. Rebecca turned the music off and moved toward the hallway. When he entered, he looked energized. "Great night," he said, loosening his tie. "Huge opportunity." "That's good," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "You okay?" "I'm fine." He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and disappeared into the bathroom. Rebecca stood alone in the dim hallway. Fine. That word had become her shield. But tonight something felt different. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. She was aware that she had been adjusting herself piece by piece for years, aware that she missed the version of herself who sang loudly in church and walked without hesitation. She returned to the living room and stood in the same spot as before. Shoulders back, chin lifted. No audience, no applause, just intention. And for the first time, the idea formed clearly in her mind. She didn't want permission to shine. She wanted ownership. The music from earlier still echoed faintly in her memory. Savannah outside continued celebrating business deals and rooftop gatherings. Inside the house beneath the live oaks, something quieter, but far more important, had begun. Rebecca was no longer just enduring. She was considering change. The humiliation did not happen at home. It happened where Rebecca could not pretend she misheard it. It was a Saturday afternoon community fundraiser near Forsyth Park, an open-air event supporting local youth programs. Booths lined the walkway. Food trucks filled the air with the scent of fried shrimp and lemonade. Families moved from table to table under wide white tents. Liam insisted they attend. "It's good visibility," he said that morning while adjusting his blazer. "Investors like community involvement." Rebecca dressed carefully. Not bold, not loud, just neat. Nia wore her sparkly silver shoes. At first, the event felt light. Children laughed near the fountain. Volunteers handed out pamphlets. Rebecca held Nia's hand while Liam greeted people with confident handshakes. "You made it," someone said to Liam. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied smoothly. Rebecca smiled beside him. They stopped near a photography booth set up for families. A volunteer encouraged them to take a picture. "Come on," Nia begged. "Family photo." Liam hesitated, then stepped aside Rebecca. The photographer lifted the camera. "All right, big smiles." Rebecca adjusted a loose curl behind her ear and leaned slightly toward Liam. He glanced at her and muttered under his breath, but not quietly enough. "Stand straight. You look awkward." She straightened immediately. The camera flashed. "Perfect," the photographer said. As the volunteer handed them the printed photo, Liam examined it first. He laughed. "Wow," he said casually, holding it up. "Nia steals the whole picture. She's definitely the star." Rebecca forced a smile. Nia grinned proudly, but Liam wasn't finished. "I guess some genes are stronger than others," he added lightly. The nearby volunteer chuckled politely. Rebecca felt heat crawl up her neck. It was subtle, but it wasn't. Nia looked between them. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Nothing, baby," Liam replied quickly. "You just got lucky. Lucky." Rebecca's stomach tightened. The volunteer stepped away. A couple standing nearby exchanged an awkward glance. Rebecca reached for the photo, but Liam kept holding it, still smiling. "See?" he said. "Camera loves her. You always look so serious." The words were soft, public, clear, and for the first time Rebecca did not pretend they were harmless. Something shifted sharply inside her. Nia tugged at her hand. "Mommy, you look pretty." Rebecca knelt down to her daughter's level. "Thank you." Her voice was steady, but her chest felt tight. If you've ever smiled through something that hurt you in public, if you've ever let a comment slide because you didn't want to make a scene, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a breaking point moment where something small wasn't small anymore? Let me know. And if this story is speaking to you, like the video, it helps more people find it. Rebecca stood slowly. "Liam," she said quietly, "can I talk to you?" He looked surprised. "Now?" "Yes." They stepped away from the crowd toward the public restroom building near the park. Inside the tiled hallway, the noise of the event faded. Rebecca turned to face him. "What was that?" she asked calmly. "What?" he replied. "The comment about genes." He shrugged. "It was a joke. It didn't feel like one." "You're overthinking it." Rebecca stared at him. "No," she said softly. "I'm not." He crossed his arms defensively. "You're being sensitive." It was light-hearted. "In front of strangers?" It wasn't a big deal. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from clarity. "For years," she said carefully, "you've made comments like that. About my clothes, my hair, my face. I laugh it off. I adjust. But you do it in front of our daughter." He looked annoyed. "Don't twist this." "I'm not twisting anything." Silence hung between them. Outside, faint music continued. Liam exhaled sharply. "You're making something out of nothing." Rebecca felt something inside her finally settle. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. This was the line. "You embarrassed me," she said simply. "That's dramatic." She studied his face. There it was, the dismissal, the minimization, the certainty that she would let it go like always, but she didn't respond. Instead, she nodded once. "Okay," she said quietly. That unsettled him more than argument would have. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means I heard you." She walked out first, back into sunlight, back into noise. But she wasn't the same woman who walked into that restroom. She didn't cry. She didn't argue further. She didn't defend herself. She observed. And she decided. This would be the last time she accepted being reduced in public. Nia ran toward her with cotton candy in hand. "Mommy, look." Rebecca smiled. Genuinely. "I see it." Behind her, Liam stood still for a moment before following. He thought the conversation was over. He thought she would cool down by dinner. He didn't understand something critical. She had stopped waiting for him to change. She had started thinking about changing herself, and that difference would reshape everything. The change did not begin loudly. It began quietly the next morning. Liam left early for a strategy meeting connected to the Atlanta expansion. He barely mentioned the fundraiser. As far as he was concerned, the moment had passed. Rebecca did not bring it up again. After dropping Nia at preschool, she sat in her car longer than usual. Her phone rested in her hand. She scrolled absent-mindedly at first, emails, reminders, grocery lists. Then her thumb paused. A photo. The old Greyhound bus station in Savannah, now transformed into the Grey Restaurant. She had saved it months ago without fully knowing why. The building used to represent segregation, division, limitation. Now it represented reinvention, elegance rising from restriction. She zoomed in on the image. Same foundation, different outcome. Rebecca whispered to herself, it didn't move. It changed. The thought stayed with her. Near downtown, a place she had driven past dozens of times but never entered. That afternoon, instead of going straight home after errands, she pulled into a small fitness studio. She sat in the parking lot for a full minute. Then she stepped out. Inside, the air smelled of rubber mats and effort. She signed up for a beginner class without overthinking it. The first session was humbling. She struggled to keep pace. Her muscles burned faster than expected. Sweat gathered along her hairline. But when it ended, she felt something unfamiliar. Not validation. Momentum. That evening, while Liam worked late reviewing financial projections for Atlanta, Rebecca looked up simple nutrition guides online. She adjusted grocery lists. She chose differently, not drastically, just intentionally. The next morning, she returned to the fitness studio, and the morning after that. Within weeks, her body began responding, not dramatically, but steadily. The physical shift was noticeable, but more important was the mental shift. She was doing something without asking permission. One Friday afternoon after another workout, Rebecca drove downtown to a black-owned salon she had admired for years but never entered. The boutique was filled with natural light and confident women speaking freely. Laughter moved easily from chair to chair. Rebecca ran her fingers through her curls before sitting down. "What are we doing today?" a stylist asked. Rebecca hesitated for half a second. "Something intentional," she replied. They discussed shape, volume, definition. When the appointment ended, her curls framed her face differently, not radically altered, just elevated. She studied herself in the salon mirror, not to criticize, to observe. This time she did not question whether she looked plain. She saw effort. She saw care. She saw someone reclaiming space. Later that evening at home, she practiced walking across the living room in a pair of heels she had avoided for years. The first attempt was awkward. She nearly lost balance and grabbed the back of the couch. Instead of feeling embarrassed, she laughed, out loud. It startled her. Nia peeked from the hallway. "What are you doing?" "Learning," Rebecca replied. "Can I try?" Nia asked. Rebecca handed her the shoes. They both tried walking across the room. They both failed. They both laughed. For the first time in months, the house felt playful. When Liam came home that night, he noticed the subtle changes but didn't comment. He was distracted, speaking rapidly about timelines and investor pressure. "I might need to stay in Atlanta longer next month," he said while scrolling through emails. "That's fine," Rebecca answered calmly. He paused briefly, as if expecting a reaction. There wasn't one. Weeks passed. Rebecca signed up for a small modeling workshop advertised on a local community board. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't competitive. It was exploratory. The first session required participants to practice presence, eye contact, breathing, pacing. Rebecca felt self-conscious at first, but as the instructor guided them through simple movements, something clicked. Presence wasn't about perfection. It was about ownership. She practiced turning slowly, pausing intentionally, holding eye contact without apologizing. At home, she applied those lessons in small ways, speaking clearly, responding without shrinking, walking into rooms without scanning Liam's expression first. The changes were subtle enough that Liam didn't immediately identify them, but he sensed something shifting. One evening, as Rebecca passed him in the hallway, he looked at her longer than usual. "Did you do something different?" he asked. "Yes," she replied simply. He waited for explanation. None came. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to challenge him. She was building something independent of his reaction. And slowly, confidence began forming, not from compliments, not from validation, but from repetition. Workout after workout, lesson after lesson, choice after choice, the gray building had not relocated. It had redefined itself. Rebecca understood now. Reinvention did not require permission. It required decision, and she had made hers. The house had grown quieter, but not emptier. Liam spent more evenings on calls about the Atlanta expansion. His voice carried through the office door as he discussed projections and timelines. Words like acquisition and valuation filled the hallway. Rebecca listened without interrupting, but she no longer paused her life around those conversations. After dinner, once Nia finished her homework and brushed her teeth, Rebecca turned the living room into a practice space. Coffee table pushed slightly aside, heels placed near the rug, music low but steady. At first, she practiced simple movement, walking from one wall to the other with intention. The modeling workshop had taught her pacing mattered more than speed. Slow steps, pause, turn, hold. It felt awkward, not because she lacked ability, but because she had spent years minimizing her presence. Now she was rehearsing expansion. Nia often sat cross-legged on the couch watching. "You look like a princess," she said one night. Rebecca laughed softly. "Princesses train hard. Can I clap?" Nia asked. Yes, so Nia clapped after every turn. The sound was small, but consistent. Upstairs, Liam remained absorbed in conference calls. He noticed the faint rhythm of music but assumed it was background noise. He didn't ask questions. One evening, while scrolling through local community events on her phone, Rebecca paused. A banner caught her eye. Savannah Rising Star, celebrating community women. The description wasn't about beauty alone. It emphasized leadership, resilience, presence. Her pulse quickened. She read the eligibility requirements twice. Open to residents, open to mothers, open to women redefining themselves. She stared at the registration link. For a moment, doubts surfaced. What would Liam say? Then she corrected herself. Why did that matter? She closed her eyes briefly and remembered the fundraiser at Forsyth Park. The laughter, the comment, the dismissal in the restroom hallway. She remembered how it felt to be minimized in public. Then she opened her eyes and tapped register. The confirmation email arrived within seconds. She didn't announce it. She didn't post about it. She saved the email in a private folder. Preparation intensified after that. She practiced answering potential questions aloud. What does confidence mean to you? It means acting without waiting for approval. What has shaped your growth? Choosing self-respect. Sometimes she stumbled over her own words. Sometimes she felt foolish rehearsing alone. But she continued. Late one night, Liam stepped out of his office unexpectedly while she was mid-walk across the living room. He paused. "What's all this?" he asked. "Just practicing," she replied calmly. "For what?" She met his eyes evenly. "For myself." He studied her for a second longer than usual. Then his phone buzzed, and he glanced down immediately. "Atlanta's moving faster than expected," he muttered, already turning back toward his office. The door closed again. Rebecca exhaled slowly. He wasn't paying attention, and that gave her freedom. The weeks moved quickly. She adjusted her diet further, refined her walk, practiced speaking clearly without rushing her sentences. Nia became her most loyal supporter. "You're going to win," she declared confidently. "Win what?" Rebecca teased. "Whatever you're doing." Rebecca smiled. "I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to grow." One afternoon, Nia tugged her sleeve while they were at the park. "Mommy, you should wear the blue dress." "What blue dress?" The one that makes you look shiny. Rebecca laughed. Deal, that one. She made a mental note. At night, once Liam finally fell asleep, Rebecca would sometimes sit at the kitchen table reviewing the pageant guidelines again. Talent optional, speech required, community involvement emphasized. She didn't see it as competition. She saw it as declaration. She wasn't entering to prove Liam wrong. She was entering to prove herself right. Still, a quiet tension lived beneath her preparation. What if she embarrassed herself? What if she confirmed every doubt he ever implied? The fear was real. But so was the alternative, doing nothing, and doing nothing had cost her enough. One evening, as she practiced her walk again, she stopped halfway across the room. She wasn't practicing for the stage anymore. She was rehearsing belief. Nia clapped loudly. Again! She cheered. Rebecca laughed and walked once more, slower, steadier. Upstairs, Liam's voice carried faintly through the office door as he spoke about closing the Atlanta deal. He believed the most important victory in the house would be his. He had no idea another one was forming quietly beneath the same roof. The confirmation email remained saved in her phone. Savannah Rising Star. Date circled silently on her calendar. Pageant day was approaching, and for the first time in years, Rebecca wasn't waiting to be seen. She was preparing to step forward. The morning arrived without ceremony. Savannah woke early, sunlight spilling across Forsyth Park and catching the mist above the fountain. Joggers moved along the paved paths. Vendors prepared small tables near the edges of the square. The air carried warmth and quiet anticipation. Rebecca stood at her bedroom window, not studying herself, not doubting, simply breathing. Today was not about rehearsal. It was execution. Nia burst into the room before Rebecca could speak. Is it today? Is it today? Rebecca turned and smiled. Yes, it's today. Nia ran toward the bed and jumped onto it. Are you nervous? Rebecca paused. No, she said honestly. I'm ready. The teal dress hung carefully on the closet door. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't flashy. It complemented her skin tone and brought out depth in her eyes. The fabric moved easily when she walked, structured but not stiff. She lifted it gently. For years she had dressed to avoid criticism. Today she dressed with intention. Nia watched closely as Rebecca styled her curls, not hiding them, not altering them to please anyone, just shaping them confidently. You look shiny, Nia whispered, echoing her earlier park comment. Rebecca laughed softly. Teal does that. Downstairs, Liam sat at the kitchen counter scrolling through emails. He looked up briefly when Rebecca entered. You heading somewhere? He asked. Yes, she replied evenly. Brunch with friends? Something like that. He nodded without suspicion. I've got back-to-back calls. Atlanta's closing faster than expected. I hope it goes well, she said calmly. He glanced at her dress again, longer this time. That's new. Yes. He returned to his phone. He did not ask where she was going. He did not ask why she looked composed. He assumed control remained intact. Rebecca kissed Nia's forehead and grabbed her purse. Ready? She asked. Ready. The drive downtown felt different. Savannah seemed alive in a way she hadn't noticed before. Sunlight bouncing off historic brick buildings, tourists strolling near the fountain, musicians tuning instruments in the distance. When they passed Forsyth Park, Rebecca slowed slightly. 6 weeks earlier, that park had hosted the fundraiser where Liam's comment had cut deeper than he realized. Now she drove past it without tightening her grip on the steering wheel, not because she forgot, because she grew. They arrived at the auditorium where Savannah Rising Star would be held. Other participants were already entering through side doors. Rebecca parked and turned off the engine. For a brief moment, silence filled the car. Nia reached over and squeezed her hand. You're going to be amazing, she said confidently. Rebecca looked at her daughter and felt something stronger than nerves, not anxiety, not fear, ownership. This was not about proving a point to Liam. This was about walking into a room without shrinking. She stepped out of the car carefully, smoothing the dress naturally, not self-consciously. Inside the auditorium lobby, volunteers directed participants backstage. Rebecca signed in quietly. As she walked down the hallway toward the dressing area, she noticed something different about her steps. They were steady, not rehearsed, not exaggerated, just steady. She wasn't practicing anymore, she was present. Backstage buzzed with preparation. Soft chatter, fabric rustling, heels clicking lightly against the floor. Rebecca adjusted the sash number pinned temporarily to her dress. Nia stood proudly near the side curtain, waving both hands. "Mommy," she whispered loudly. "Remember, slow and shiny." Rebecca smiled, slow and shiny. She took one slow breath, not to calm herself, but to anchor herself. Outside, the auditorium began filling. Savannah had no idea what it was about to witness, and at home, Liam had no idea his wife was about to step into the spotlight he never believed she wanted. The music cue signaled the beginning of the event. Rebecca stood just behind the curtain, not trembling, not second-guessing, just ready. And when her name was called to enter the stage lineup, she stepped forward, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone claiming visibility. The curtain lifted slowly. Music filled the auditorium, bright, confident, celebratory. Rebecca stepped forward with the other participants, heels measured against the polished stage floor. The lights were stronger than she expected, warm against her skin, illuminating every movement. For a split second, the size of the audience registered. Rows filled, whispers fading, phones raised, but she didn't retreat inward. She kept walking, slow, controlled, intentional. She reached her mark at center stage and paused exactly as she had practiced. Not stiff, not forced. Her chin level, her shoulders natural. Her eyes scanning the audience without searching for approval. In the third row, Nia sat forward in her seat, hands clasped tightly together. Rebecca caught her daughter's smile and returned it. The opening segment moved quickly. Introductions, acknowledgments, applause rising and settling like waves. When her name was announced, for the individual walk, Rebecca stepped forward alone. She stopped at the front of the stage, turned, held. Applause grew louder. It wasn't explosive yet, but it was genuine. Backstage practice paid off, not in perfection, but in presence. The interview portion began. One by one, participants were asked a question. Rebecca listened carefully, grounding herself in the moment. When her name was called again, she stepped to the microphone. The judge smiled politely. "Rebecca, what does confidence mean to you?" The auditorium quieted. Rebecca adjusted the microphone slightly. "Confidence," she began evenly, "is acting without waiting for someone else to approve you." A murmur passed through the audience. She continued, "It's understanding that your value doesn't decrease because someone else doesn't recognize it." The judge nodded. Rebecca didn't rush. She spoke clearly, allowing each sentence to land. "For a long time I thought confidence meant being chosen, being praised, being noticed. But I've learned it means choosing yourself, especially when no one else does." Applause began, small at first, then stronger. She saw Nia clapping wildly. Rebecca's voice didn't waver. "It means refusing to shrink so someone else feels bigger." The audience responded louder this time. "And if you believe people deserve second chances, if you believe growth is possible inside a marriage, inside a family, inside yourself, comment below right now. Tell me, do you believe in second chances? And if this story moves you, like this video so more people can witness it." Rebecca stepped back slightly as applause built. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't theatrical. She was certain. The next question followed quickly. "What life lesson has shaped you most?" Rebecca exhaled softly, not from nerves, but from reflection. "I learned that silence can be comfortable," she said, "but comfort isn't always healthy. Sometimes growth requires discomfort." The room grew still again. "I stopped waiting to be told I mattered," she added. "I decided I mattered." This time, the applause rose faster, louder. It spread row by row. Rebecca stepped away from the microphone as instructed. She returned to her place in line. The remaining participants answered their questions. The crowd responded politely, but something had shifted in the energy of the room. People leaned forward more now. Whispers traveled. Rebecca felt it, not pride, recognition. She stood still as the host prepared to announce finalists. The lights dimmed slightly. Music softened. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, "the judges have made their decision." Rebecca's heartbeat remained steady. She wasn't calculating odds. She wasn't scanning faces. She was simply standing, fully present in her own skin. Nia squeezed her small program tightly in the front row. The host read names slowly. Each name called stepped forward, applause for each. Rebecca remained composed. When the final pause stretched longer than expected, A ripple moved through the crowd. The host looked down at the final card. Silence deepened. Rebecca inhaled once, not nervously, just fully. Savannah waited. And for the first time in years, Rebecca did not feel invisible. The pause stretched. The host glanced at the final card again. And your Savannah rising star. A breath moved through the room. Rebecca. For half a second, Rebecca didn't move. The applause erupted instantly, not polite, not reserved, full, unrestrained. Nia leapt from her seat. "That's my mommy," she shouted, her voice cutting clearly through the roar. Rebecca stepped forward slowly, absorbing the moment without rushing it. The other participants embraced her. The host guided her to the center of the stage. The sash was adjusted across her shoulder. The crown lowered gently onto her head. It settled there, light but significant. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, not out of disbelief but acknowledgement. She had walked into this room without apology. Now she stood at its center without hesitation. The audience rose to their feet. Phones lifted higher. Applause intensified. Nia pushed through the aisle and ran toward the stage barrier, hands stretched upward. "Mommy." Rebecca bent gracefully, careful of the crown, and reached down. Volunteers allowed Nia to step up beside her for a moment. "That's my mommy," Nia repeated proudly. Rebecca held her daughter tightly. "You were right," she whispered, slow and shiny. Cameras flashed rapidly now. A local news crew moved closer. Microphones extended. "Rebecca, how does it feel?" someone asked. She straightened. "It feels earned," she replied simply. The crowd responded with another wave of applause. She did not mention Liam. She did not mention humiliation. She did not mention proving anything. She stood grounded. Across town at the public kitchen, Liam sat at a long table surrounded by polished executives discussing final numbers for the Atlanta deal. Glasses clinked. Contracts were nearly complete. His phone buzzed. He ignored it once, then again. Finally, he flipped it face up. A headline notification filled the screen. "Humble Savannah mom stuns the city. Savannah rising star crowned." The thumbnail image loaded slowly. When it appeared, his expression changed instantly. Rebecca stood center stage, teal dress radiant beneath bright lights, crown resting confidently on her head. Nia clung to her side. The caption beneath the image read, "Rebecca, community mother turned rising star." The voices at the table blurred. One of the investors leaned closer. "Everything all right?" Liam didn't respond immediately. He replayed the short video attached to the article. Rebecca speaking at the microphone. Her words clear, her posture assured, her presence undeniable. He watched the moment her name was called again. He watched Nia run toward her. He watched the crowd stand. He swallowed. "That's my wife," he said quietly. He hadn't planned to say it out loud, but the words escaped anyway. Someone at the table chuckled lightly. "Looks like you've got competition at home." Liam didn't laugh. He stared at the screen again. He saw something he had not noticed in months, maybe years. Confidence, not borrowed, not fragile, real. Without another word, he stood up. "I need to step out," he said. The investor frowned slightly. "We're about to finalize. I'll be back." He didn't wait for permission. Outside, the Savannah night air felt different. He pulled up the event live stream and began walking quickly toward his car. Rebecca was still on stage, speaking briefly to reporters. She looked composed, she looked powerful. She looked like someone he underestimated. He got into his car and started the engine immediately. He grabbed his jacket and walked out of the restaurant, leaving half-finished plates behind. The drive felt shorter than usual. His mind replayed moments from the past. Small comments, light jokes, dismissive gestures. They didn't feel light anymore. They felt costly. Back at the auditorium, Rebecca stepped down from the stage area, still surrounded by applause and flashing cameras. She glanced toward the back entrance as volunteers guided her toward interviews. She didn't know Liam had seen the broadcast yet. She didn't need to. She hadn't stepped into that spotlight for him. But as the cheers continued, and the crown caught the light above her, one thing was undeniable. The woman he thought would always stand beside him quietly had just stood above expectation publicly, and Savannah had witnessed it. Liam replayed the video 3 times before pulling out of the parking lot. Each time, Rebecca's voice hit him differently. "I stopped waiting to be told I mattered." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The first time he watched, he focused on the crown. The second time he focused on the applause. The third time he focused on her expression. There was no bitterness in it, no defiance, no performance, just certainty. He drove faster than he should have, and this time his mind didn't stay on the stage. It went backward. Stand straight. You look awkward. Don't pick something safe. You're being sensitive. She steals the picture. He remembered saying them casually. In kitchens, in cars, at Forsyth Park, he remembered Rebecca's face each time. Not angry, adjusting, smiling, accommodating. He used to think that meant she agreed. Now he wondered if it meant she was absorbing. The light turned green. He didn't move immediately. A car behind him honked. He drove on. Another memory surfaced. The night she laughed in the living room while trying to walk in heels. He had stood in the hallway watching. "What are you practicing for?" he had asked. "For myself." He hadn't taken it seriously. He should have. He reached the auditorium, parking lot, and parked abruptly. Before stepping out, he opened the live stream one more time. The moment the crown was placed on her head replayed again. The crowd rising. Nia shouting, "That's my mommy." His jaw tightened. He had built companies from nothing, negotiated contracts, closed million-dollar deals. But standing outside that auditorium, he felt smaller than he ever had in a boardroom. He leaned back in the driver's seat and stared at the ceiling. How had he missed this? No, the question shifted. How had he dismissed this? He thought about the fundraiser at Forsyth Park, the look on Rebecca's face in the restroom hallway. "I heard you." He had walked away confident she would let it pass. That confidence now felt like arrogance. He had believed success gave him authority. He had believed providing financially equaled leadership. But tonight, the city applauded her without his influence, without his endorsement, without his approval. That realization unsettled him deeply. A new thought surfaced, one he didn't want to consider. What if she didn't need him anymore? The idea landed hard, not because of pride, because of fear. He stepped out of the car. The cool air hit him sharply. He walked toward the auditorium entrance, slowing slightly as he saw small groups exiting, audience members talking excitedly, replaying moments on their phones. He overheard fragments. Her speech was powerful. She carried herself so well. She's inspiring. No one mentioned him. For the first time in years, he wasn't the center of the narrative. He stopped just before the entrance doors, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. He studied himself briefly, not critically, honestly. He had built his identity around control. Control of business, control of outcomes, control of image. But he had never considered how his words shaped the person closest to him. He thought back to Nia's voice earlier in the video. "That's my mommy." The pride in it was unmistakable. He imagined Nia years from now repeating his subtle comparisons to someone else. The thought made him uncomfortable. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't about public embarrassment. It wasn't about investors seeing the headline. It was about something much simpler. He had underestimated his wife, repeatedly, and she had grown anyway. The realization cut deeper than any confrontation would have. He opened the doors and stepped inside. The auditorium was quieter now. Most of the crowd had shifted toward the lobby. He saw Rebecca near the exit corridor, surrounded by a few reporters finishing questions. The crown still rested securely on her head. She looked calm, grounded, not inflated, not overwhelmed, just present. He felt something collapse internally, not dramatically, not loudly, just decisively. His ego had always relied on being the most impressive person in the room. Tonight, he wasn't. And instead of resentment, he felt something heavier, regret. He took one step forward, then another. This wasn't about reclaiming control. This was about acknowledging truth. And for the first time in their marriage, he wasn't preparing a defense. He was preparing an apology. By the time Liam reached the lobby, most of the crowd had begun to thin. Clusters of people lingered near the exit, still discussing the event. Volunteers folded programs. A few reporters wrapped up their final clips. Rebecca stepped outside through the side doors, the crown still resting carefully on her head. Nia walked beside her, gripping her hand tightly as if afraid someone might take her away. The Savannah night air felt cooler now. Beyond the parking area, the historic road leading toward Wormslow stretched beneath a canopy of oak trees, their branches forming a natural archway overhead. Rebecca paused near the edge of the walkway, taking in the moment quietly. Nia looked up at her again. "You did it." Rebecca knelt slightly. We did it. Footsteps approached from behind. Rebecca straightened slowly. She didn't need to turn immediately to know who it was. Liam stopped a few feet away. For a moment, none of them spoke. The distance between them felt heavier than it should have. Nia broke the silence first. "Daddy, Mommy won." Liam forced a small smile. "I saw." His eyes moved to Rebecca, and stayed there. She looked different, not because of the crown, not because of the dress, because she wasn't waiting for his reaction. "Rebecca," he said carefully. She met his gaze without hesitation. "Yes?" He swallowed once. "I watched the whole thing." She didn't respond immediately. He continued. "You were incredible." The word lingered between them. Incredible. It had never passed his lips toward her before. Rebecca blinked once, absorbing it. "I'm proud of you," he added quietly. Nia looked back and forth between them, sensing something deeper beneath the surface. Rebecca's face didn't soften instantly. It didn't harden either. It simply held steady. "Thank you," she replied. Her tone was polite, measured, not relieved. Liam stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. "I didn't know you were doing this." "I know," he nodded slowly. "I should have known." "Yes," she said again. The simplicity of her answers unsettled him. There was no accusation, no raised voice, just clarity. He glanced briefly at the thinning crowd before looking back at her. "I was wrong," he said. The words felt unfamiliar. "I've said things over the years. Things I thought were harmless. They weren't." Rebecca held his gaze. "You embarrassed me," she said calmly, "more than once." He flinched slightly. "I know that now. Do you?" "Yes." Her eyes searched his face carefully. "For a long time," she continued, "I believed I needed to adjust, dress differently, speak less, laugh quieter, just to avoid your comments." He exhaled slowly. "I thought I was joking. You weren't." Silence settled briefly between them, not tense, honest. Nia shifted beside them, sensing the seriousness. Liam crouched slightly to be closer to Rebecca's eye level. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You did," she replied. The directness left no room for deflection. He nodded once. "I see that." Rebecca studied him. The man standing in front of her wasn't defensive. He wasn't dismissive. But he also wasn't automatically forgiven. "You said you were proud of me," she said. "I am. Be specific." The request caught him off guard. "I'm proud that you did this without my support," he said slowly. "Proud that you didn't wait for me to validate you." Rebecca didn't smile. "But you shouldn't have had to do it alone," he added. "No," she agreed. A car passed slowly down the road behind them, headlights cutting briefly across the oak branches. Liam straightened again. "I've spent years believing providing financially was enough," he said. "It isn't." Rebecca's voice remained even. "No, it isn't." He hesitated. "I don't want to be the reason you shrink." "I stopped shrinking," she replied. The sentence landed firmly. He absorbed it. "Yes," he said quietly. "You did." Nia tugged Rebecca's hand. "Are we going home?" Rebecca looked down at her daughter, then back at Liam. "Soon." Liam stepped closer again. "I'm sorry," he said clearly. "Not because you won, not because people are talking. I'm sorry because I failed you long before tonight." Rebecca held his eyes for several seconds. The apology was real, but so was the damage. "I appreciate that," she said carefully. "But words are easy when you're losing control." He flinched again, not defensively this time, but honestly. "You think this is about control?" he asked. "I know it was." He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. She wasn't attacking. She was stating fact. "I don't expect tonight to fix anything," she continued. "Winning didn't erase the past. I don't want it erased," he said. "I want to understand it." Rebecca considered that. "And now?" he asked quietly. "Now I decide." The wind moved lightly through the oak branches overhead. Liam looked at her again, truly looked, not as his wife, but as an individual standing confidently in front of him. He reached forward instinctively as if to touch her arm, then stopped himself. Permission mattered now. "Can we talk more?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, "but not here." He nodded immediately. "Okay." The crowd had nearly disappeared now. The night felt quieter. Nia squeezed both their hands again. Mommy won, she repeated softly, as if grounding the moment. Rebecca smiled down at her daughter. Yes, she said, she had. But this conversation was not about victory, it was about balance, and that balance had shifted. The night had quieted almost completely. Only a few cars remained in the lot. Volunteers locked side doors behind them. The echo of applause had faded into memory. Rebecca adjusted the crown gently and looked toward Liam. You said you wanted to talk, she said. Yes, then let's talk honestly. Nia tugged her sleeve again. Mommy, can I sit in the car? Rebecca nodded. Leave the window cracked. I'll be right there. Nia ran toward the car happily, still holding her program from the event. When the door closed, the space between Rebecca and Liam shifted again. There was no audience now. No applause. No distraction. Just truth. Liam spoke first. I don't want to lose you, he said plainly. Rebecca studied him carefully. Lose me? She repeated. Yes, you already did, she replied softly. He swallowed. When? He asked. When I stopped believing I needed your approval. The words landed without anger. Just fact. He shook his head slightly. That's not losing you. That's growth. It's both, she said. He hesitated. What are you saying? Rebecca reached into her purse slowly. For a brief second, Liam assumed she might pull out her phone. Instead, she pulled out a folded envelope. It had been carried there intentionally. I didn't enter the pageant to make you notice me, she said evenly. I know that now. No, she corrected gently. You don't. She handed him the envelope. His hands moved cautiously as he opened it. Inside were printed documents. Legal documents. He stared at the heading, Separation Agreement Draft. His chest tightened. You were planning to leave, he asked quietly. I was preparing to, she replied. The air between them changed immediately, not dramatic, decisive. You never said anything, he murmured. You never asked, she answered. He looked up at her quickly. This wasn't because of tonight, she continued. Tonight was confirmation, not motivation. He glanced down at the papers again. When did you do this? 2 weeks ago. The timeline struck him. 2 weeks ago, he had been finalizing Atlanta projections, celebrating expected growth. Meanwhile, she had been preparing an exit. I wasn't transforming to win you back, she said calmly. I was transforming to prove I could survive without you. The sentence hit harder than anything she had said all night. He looked at her differently now, not as a wife who might forgive him, but as a woman capable of walking away. You were ready to leave me, he repeated slowly. I was ready to leave a version of our marriage that diminished me. He exhaled sharply, stepping back slightly as if the ground had shifted. I thought... He paused. I thought we were stable. We were structured, she corrected. Not equal. Silence followed. He looked toward the car where Nia sat humming softly to herself. You would have taken her, he said quietly. Yes, that word hurt him visibly. You didn't think I'd fight for you? He asked. I didn't think you understood what you were fighting for. He closed his eyes briefly. The reality settled heavily. He had assumed his status, his income, his role as provider guaranteed loyalty. He had never considered that respect might matter more. You don't need me anymore, he said finally. Rebecca answered carefully. I don't need your permission anymore. The distinction was sharp. He looked at the crown on her head again. You planned this before tonight, he said. Yes. Why didn't you file? Rebecca held his gaze. Because I wanted to know whether I was strong enough first. And now? She didn't answer immediately. The pause stretched. I am, she said finally. The statement wasn't threatening. It was liberating. He folded the papers slowly, his hands unsteady. Are you going to file them? He asked. That depends. On what? On whether you're willing to change without fearing that I might leave. He looked confused. You already might. Exactly. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. For years he believed she depended on him. Now he realized he depended on her willingness to stay. I don't want to lose this family, he said. Then don't treat it like a business acquisition, she replied. He absorbed that. You were never the prize, Liam, she continued gently. Stability was... The words stripped away his last layer of ego. He wasn't competing against other men. He was competing against her independence. The wind moved lightly through the oak branches above them. Nia tapped lightly on the car window. Mommy? Rebecca glanced back at her daughter, then returned her attention to Liam. I'm not angry, she said. I'm awake. He nodded slowly. And I don't know yet what that means for us." The uncertainty hung between them, not hostile, but real. Liam held the separation papers in his hand, feeling their weight. For the first time in his life, his wealth could not fix this. His status could not shield him. His words alone would not repair it. Rebecca stepped toward the car. "We'll talk tomorrow," she said calmly. He didn't argue. He didn't demand. He didn't command. He simply stood there, watching the woman he underestimated walk away carrying both a crown and a choice. The next morning did not feel triumphant. It felt quiet, rested in its box on the sideboard, not displayed, not hidden. Rebecca stood at the kitchen counter pouring coffee while Nia colored at the table. The crown. Liam entered the kitchen slower than usual. He hadn't slept much. The separation papers remained folded on the nightstand where he had placed them carefully. Rebecca did not look up immediately. "Morning," he said. "Morning." His voice carried none of its usual authority. "I've been thinking," he began. "I know," she replied evenly. Nia looked between them curiously. "Are you mad at Daddy?" she asked suddenly. Rebecca knelt beside her daughter. "I'm not mad," she said gently. "I'm deciding." "Deciding what?" "How our family works." Nia seemed satisfied with that answer and returned to coloring. Liam waited until Rebecca stood again. "I don't want you to feel like you're deciding alone," he said. She held his gaze. "I was alone for a long time." The sentence was not dramatic, it was factual. He nodded slowly. "What do you need, Ede?" he asked. It was the first time he'd asked her that directly. Rebecca didn't rush to answer. "I need consistency," she said. "Not promises." He listened carefully. "I need you to stop correcting me in public. I need you to stop comparing. I need you to speak to me like a partner, not an accessory." He absorbed that. "And if I fail?" he asked quietly. "You don't get unlimited retries." The clarity startled him, not because it was harsh, but because it was firm. Nia slid off her chair and walked toward them. "Are we still a family?" she asked. Rebecca bent slightly to meet her eyes. "Yes," she said, "but families grow. That's what we're doing." Liam crouched beside them. "I'm not going anywhere," he told Nia. Rebecca's eyes flicked toward him briefly. "Staying isn't enough," she said calmly. He understood. Later that afternoon, Rebecca sat across from Liam at the dining table. The separation papers lay between them. "I didn't file them," she said. "I know. I wanted to see who I was without depending on you emotionally, and I'm capable." The words didn't come with hostility. They came with certainty. He leaned back in his chair, processing. "I don't want to keep you because you need me," he said slowly. "I want you to choose to stay." Rebecca studied him. "That means you don't get to monitor my growth. I won't. You don't get to belittle what you don't understand. I won't. You don't get to dismiss me when it's convenient." He nodded. "I won't." Silence settled. Nia ran through the hallway laughing at something she imagined, her voice bright and unaware of the weight of adult decisions. Rebecca reached for the papers and slid them back into her folder. "I'm not filing these," she said. Relief flickered across Liam's face. "But I'm not tearing them up either." The relief paused. "They stay," she continued, "not as a threat, as accountability." He nodded slowly. "I accept that. You'll earn trust again through behavior, not speeches. I understand." She leaned back slightly. "And this doesn't mean everything goes back to normal." "Good," he said quietly. Normal wasn't healthy. That answer surprised her. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't polished. It was honest. Rebecca studied him carefully, looking for signs of performance. She didn't find any, but she also didn't offer immediate warmth. "This is rebuilding," she said. "Brick by brick." He allowed himself a small breath. "Then I'll start today." "How?" He paused. "I'll cancel Atlanta for this weekend." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a big move for you. It's overdue." She considered that. "Do it because it matters," she said, "not because you're afraid." He nodded. "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Of what?" "Of realizing too late what I almost lost." Rebecca did not soften fully, but she didn't turn away either. That afternoon, Liam called his team and postponed his trip. He didn't blame scheduling conflicts. He simply said, "family priority." It felt unfamiliar on his tongue. but necessary. That evening, they sat together for dinner without phones on the table. The conversation was simple. School stories from Nia, plans for the weekend, small things, no grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just presence. When Nia went to bed, Rebecca and Liam remained at the table. "This is a beginning," she said quietly. "Yes, it's not redemption, I know." She nodded once. For the first time in years, the power in the room felt balanced. Not because he surrendered, not because she dominated, but because she no longer feared leaving, and he no longer assumed she wouldn't. The separation papers remained in the drawer, unfiled, unforgotten, and for now, that was enough. 3 months passed quietly, not dramatically, not perfectly, just steadily. Savannah shifted into warmer evenings, longer daylight, and crowded sidewalks along the riverfront. Tourists filled the squares again. Street musicians returned to familiar corners. Inside their home, the atmosphere had changed in smaller ways. Liam no longer corrected Rebecca's clothing choices before events. He no longer made passing remarks disguised as humor. When she spoke in public, he listened fully instead of interrupting. The changes were not announced. They were practiced. Rebecca began receiving invitations to speak at local community centers after clips from the pageant circulated online. Her words about choosing yourself had resonated beyond the auditorium. One Saturday morning, she stood at the front of a small community hall near downtown Savannah, addressing a group of women seated in folding chairs. She didn't wear the crown. She wore a simple blouse and dark jeans. "My growth didn't begin on stage," she said clearly. "It began when I stopped dismissing how I felt." The room was quiet. I didn't wake up brave. I practiced it. In small ways. Every day. Women nodded slowly. She didn't mention Liam. She didn't frame herself as a victim. She spoke about choice, about self-respect, about accountability. After the session, several women approached her quietly to thank her. One of them said, "You helped me understand I don't have to stay silent." Rebecca smiled gently. "Neither did I." Across the room, Liam stood near the back wall, not in the spotlight, not introducing himself as her husband, just listening. He hadn't offered to come at first. He had asked, "Would it help if I attended?" Rebecca had considered, "It would help if you listened." So he did. He didn't clap louder than others. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct her phrasing afterward. On the drive home, he said simply, "You spoke clearly." "Thank you," she replied. No grand commentary followed. At home, he began taking on more responsibilities without announcing them. School pickups, grocery runs, bedtime routines, not as favors, as participation. One evening, Nia ran into the kitchen. "Daddy helped with my project," she announced proudly. Rebecca looked toward Liam. He shrugged lightly. It was fun. She noticed something subtle. He no longer needed credit. Their dinners changed too. Phones stayed away from the table. Conversations slowed down. When Rebecca shared upcoming speaking dates, Liam asked practical questions. "How can I support?" The question came without defensiveness. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she said, "I've got it," and he respected that. They were not discussed often, but their presence mattered. One evening, while organizing the study, Liam found himself standing in front of that drawer. He opened it slowly. The folder remained where Rebecca had placed it. He didn't touch it. He closed the drawer again carefully. Later that night, he said quietly, "I know those papers are still there." "Yes," Rebecca replied. "I don't blame you." She studied him for a moment. "I don't want to use them," she said. "I know, but I will if I need to. I understand." The exchange was brief, direct, without hostility. Months earlier, that conversation would have ended in dismissal. Now it ended in acknowledgement. Rebecca continued her speaking engagements, not weekly, not aggressively, but consistently. Her story traveled beyond Savannah through small online clips and shared posts. She didn't chase fame. She accepted responsibility. Liam adjusted his travel schedule more intentionally. He still worked hard, still negotiated, still pursued growth in Atlanta. But he no longer treated home as an afterthought. One afternoon at Forsyth Park, they walked together while Nia ran ahead near the fountain. Rebecca paused briefly. This was the same park where humiliation had once tightened her chest. Now she stood without tension. Liam noticed her glance around. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said simply. He didn't probe further. He didn't attempt to interpret her silence. He just stood beside her. That was new. Trust did not return in a single moment. It rebuilt gradually, through consistent behavior, quiet respect, and accountability. Rebecca did not lower her guard entirely. She didn't need to. Strength didn't require suspicion anymore. It required awareness, and awareness remained. The crown rested in its box upstairs. The separation papers remained in the drawer. The marriage remained under construction. But for the first time in years, it felt mutual. Late summer settled gently over the Savannah riverfront. The sky softened into shades of gold and violet as boats moved slowly along the water. The breeze carried music from nearby patios and the steady hum of evening conversation. Rebecca walked along the promenade with Nia skipping ahead, her laughter blending easily with the rhythm of the city. Liam walked beside Rebecca, not leading, not lagging. Beside. Nia paused near the railing and leaned forward carefully to watch the water ripple below. "Look," she called. "It's shiny." Rebecca stepped closer, resting her hands lightly on her daughter's shoulders. "It always was," she said softly. Liam stood just behind them. He didn't insert himself into the moment. He allowed it. After a few minutes, Nia ran toward a nearby open space, chasing imaginary shapes only she could see. Rebecca and Liam continued walking slowly. "You've changed," Liam said quietly. Rebecca glanced at him. "Yes. I don't mean just since the pageant. I know." He nodded once. "You don't wait for my reaction anymore." "I don't need it." There was no tension in her voice, only clarity. He accepted that. They walked in silence for several steps, watching the river reflect the fading light. "I used to think strength meant control," Liam admitted. Rebecca didn't respond immediately. "I was wrong," he continued. "Strength is restraint, and respect." She looked at him carefully. "Respect isn't something you announce," she said. "It's something you practice. I'm learning. I see that." The acknowledgement mattered. Ahead, Nia spun in a small circle and waved for them to hurry. Rebecca smiled. "You coming?" she asked Liam. "Yes." They caught up with their daughter and walked together along the waterfront. Not as a perfect family, but as a rebuilding one. As they passed a small crowd gathered around a street performer, a woman approached Rebecca hesitantly. "I just wanted to say," she said softly, "your speech months ago meant a lot to me." Rebecca smiled warmly. "Thank you." The woman glanced briefly at Liam and Nia, then walked away. Liam didn't try to interpret the exchange. He didn't claim pride. He simply walked. That night, back at home, Nia fell asleep quickly after insisting on retelling the pageant story one more time. "Mommy won," she whispered as her eyes closed. Rebecca brushed her daughter's hair back gently. "Yes." Later, in the living room, Rebecca sat quietly while Liam stood near the window. The separation papers remained in the drawer, unmoved, unused, but understood. "You never tore them up," Liam said quietly. "No, will you?" Rebecca considered the question. "Not because things are better," she said carefully, "but because I know I don't need them anymore." He nodded slowly. That answer held weight. It wasn't dependency. It was choice. They didn't embrace dramatically. They didn't celebrate. They sat side by side in calm understanding. The journey from humiliation to recognition had not been loud. It had been deliberate. Rebecca had discovered something no applause could create, and Liam had learned something no contract could buy. Before this story closes, let me ask you something. Have you ever underestimated someone close to you? Have you ever allowed someone else's words to define you? If this story moved you, if it reminded you that growth is possible and respect is earned, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Mr. Gray Family for more stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Because some transformations are not about appearance, they are about awakening. That evening, as the Savannah lights reflected off the river once more, Rebecca stood at the edge of the water with Liam and Nia beside her. She wasn't standing above him. She wasn't standing behind him. She was standing with him, and the woman he once tried to reduce had become the woman the city applauded. The woman he once corrected had become the woman who corrected the balance. The woman he thought would always remain quiet had found her voice, and in the end, the woman he tried to shrink became the woman America stood for.